Has this ever happened to you? You're learning a new language and you feel overwhelmed with the number of vocabulary. You feel lost because you don't know which learning material to focus on. You keep forgetting what you learn and feel like you're not making any progress even though you study a lot. The problem is not your effort, it's your focus. Your brain is not designed for long-term retention without deliberate organization and reinforcement of that information that you learn. If you're learning a new language, you need a system that helps you to collect information, organize that information, and retrieve that information when you need it so that you can apply that information, so that you can focus on getting fluent. This was exactly how I was able to learn to speak Mandarin Chinese in 1 year. This is the same system that many learners use to learn a new language, learn to speak a new language in record time by using a second brain. What is a second brain? Your mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. A second brain is basically a concept that has been popularized by productivity experts like David Allen, Tiago Forte, and essentially it means it's an external system to help you to bridge the gap between the collection of ideas from all the ideas that you have throughout the day to quickly collect that idea with low friction and then bridge the gap between collection and the application of idea where you're actually learning it. In other words, it helps you to get stuff done, to be more productive, to improve your learning. But a second brain is not about blindly collecting information or knowledge. This is like hoarding vocabulary, and it doesn't help you to get fluent. As Bruce Lee says, knowledge is not enough. We must apply. Most language learners are already very good at collecting information. We're very good at seeing a new vocabulary, seeing a new phrase, and collecting it into our dictionary. The problem is we're very poor at applying that information, very poor at making it stick so that we remember it, so that we can use it the next time that we want to speak and express ourselves. And a second brain helps us to do that. A second brain makes sure that every phrase, every sentence, every vocabulary, every cultural insight that you gain throughout your learning journey is stored in the right place so that it's easy for you to organize it and retrieve it when you need it. It turns scattered learning into a structured process, allowing you to see connections, track progress, and accelerate fluency. So how does the second brain work? A second brain can be anything that helps you to offload cognitive load so that you can return to it later to accomplish your goals. You can think of it as a complementary brain or a complementary system to your biological brain. That's why we call it a second brain. It helps you to offload information, reduce clutter, and improve productivity. You can think of it also as RAM, extra RAM for your brain. So RAM, typically we use it in the terms of computer. It's your random access memory. So this is temporary memory that your computer can use, but your main CPU is the main processing power of your computer. So it's whatever you're doing in this active moment, but always in the background, you have the RAM that's temporarily holding files, holding processes for when you need it later on. And there's many ways to do this. You can use various different tools to accomplish this, to create a second brain. For example, you can keep it very manual. You can use a pen and a paper, or you can use digital tools to help enhance your productivity and memory. For example, you can use dictionary apps. For me, for learning Mandarin Chinese, I like to use the app Pleco for storing vocabulary and phrases that I've learned throughout the day. A lot of people like using Anki because it helps them create flashcards for notes and collecting resources. You can use note-taking apps like Notion, or you can use simple apps like Apple Notes, Google Docs, anything can work. But the basic steps are the same. There's 4 major steps. Number 1 is capture. So you're collecting ideas, notes, and information in a centralized place. Number 2 is organize that information. You're structuring the information in a way that makes it easy to access and use later on. Number 3 is find. So you're quickly finding that information or retrieving that information when you need it later on. And then 4 is create, using the stored knowledge to generate new ideas, to apply the vocabulary that you learn so that you can speak more fluently. The most important steps are probably 1 and 4. So we have to remember that the main point of a second brain is to help us bridge the gap between collecting information and applying that information. So it doesn't help if we're only doing 1, 2, and 3, only collecting information, organizing it, and retrieving it without actual application of that information. Number 4, step 4 is the main thing that we want to use the second brain for, so that the vocabulary that we're learning sticks into our brain and we're able to use it fluently when we're speaking in a conversation. But before we talk about how to build a second brain, we should talk about the benefits. Why are second brains so effective for language learning? Number 1, it reduces context switching. So I used to spend hours when I first started learning Mandarin Chinese looking scouring the internet, looking on YouTube for good language learning material, interesting videos, podcasts, and I would spend hours doing this. And I would constantly get distracted by social media, Instagram, Reels, TikTok, YouTube videos. There was always something distracting me, and this was causing decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is essentially when you have too many choices and you can't figure out what you want to do, and your productivity decreases. Research shows that decision fatigue can significantly reduce productivity. When faced with too many choices, learners often spend more time deciding what to study than actually studying. On top of that, searching for material, searching for resources is very different than the task of studying, the context of studying. Switching from one task that is very different to another task during the same session hurts your productivity. This is known as context switching, shifting your attention from one activity to another activity that's different. Research shows that context switching can hurt productivity, mental health, and long-term memory. Impact on productivity. Context switching can reduce productivity by 40%. Every time you context switch, it takes up to 23 minutes to regain focus after a distraction. Reduced attention to detail can lead to mistakes. Impact on mental health and memory. It can lead to stress, fatigue, and burnout. Context switching can impact long-term memory and learning, and it can make it harder for you to detach from constant distractions. So a second brain specifically fixes this problem, specifically targets this issue by separating the context of looking for material and studying. And it does this by building a system that allows us to very quickly collect information throughout the day so that we're not spending time collecting information when we should be studying. This way, you're batching the work of collecting high quality information throughout the day up front so that later on, when you have time to actively study, you can focus on studying and you're not focusing on collecting information, distracting yourself, trying to fight off decision fatigue and fight off context switching. Okay, so what do we do once we've collected that information? The next benefit is we can copy real sources. When I first started learning Chinese, I used to only collect isolated vocabulary. But what I quickly found was that I would easily forget these vocabulary words. They didn't stick. Nothing was anchoring them into my memory. But we know there's a better way to do this. Instead of collecting isolated vocabulary that is sterile and difficult to remember because there's very little context, we can collect better things. For example, we can collect sentences, we can collect phrases, especially sentences and phrases that native speakers are using all the time. This gives us context. We can collect resources too. Resources like the podcasts that we're listening to, videos that we like and we find entertaining, movies, TV shows that we like. Like I said, collecting from authentic sources where we're listening and seeing real people, native speakers speaking, is way better than collecting just isolated vocabulary because this gives us context. Context is critical for learning and memory because it helps us to anchor what we're learning into our memory. It adds texture to our learning, making it easier to remember. You can think about context as any information that is provided outside of the actual vocabulary. So for example, if you're reading a book, context can come from the tone of the writer. It can come from the story itself, the different characters. It can come from your imagination, from the environment. If you're watching a video, if you're listening to a podcast, it can come from the sound of the speaker. It can come from the background music. It can come from the color of the clothing that the speakers are wearing, and much, much more. All of these things provide context to anchor it into your memory. So the next time that you're trying to retrieve and recall that word, you have all of this extra context to help anchor it into your memory. Studies have shown that authentic materials improve learner engagement, motivation, and language acquisition outcomes compared to traditional textbook-based learning. Authentic materials expose learners to real-world language use, including cultural nuances, idioms, and natural speech patterns. And on top of this, I've spoken about this before, but authentic materials are so much more interesting. And this is probably one of the most important things when it comes to language learning. You have to find material that you're interested in instead of learning from boring and dry textbooks. But for me, I way prefer learning from authentic material, native material that is actually interesting, that resonates with me. I can pick from a variety of different topics. For example, I can listen to podcasts about the topic that I'm interested. I can watch TV shows about topics that I'm interested, documentaries, movies. I can read books. These are way better, in my opinion, than reading a textbook. If you're interested in learning more about this is exactly what I teach you in the Copy-Paste Speak course, which is a proven system to help you to improve your listening and speaking by using a second brain. The third benefit of a second brain is it allows us to easily copy native speakers. You struggle to speak a new language because you lack confidence. You lack confidence because you don't know if you'll be able to create sentences on command. Research in second language acquisition emphasizes the importance of formulaic language, fixed expressions, and chunks of language that native speakers use frequently. You can think of these copied phrases or these chunks as the building blocks of language. In the beginning, when we're first trying to improve our speaking, when we're not very fluent yet, there's too many moving pieces. We have to think about grammar, our pronunciation. It's way too much to ask to start telling us to also create sentences on command. This is where the magic of copying native speakers comes into play, and this is why it's so powerful. We can offload thinking about pronunciation and grammar and creating sentences, and we just focus on copying, just mimicking native speakers that we know sound right, sound authentic. And a second brain is perfect for collecting all of these native phrases and sentences. By saving common expressions, idioms, and conversational chunks, you can build a mental library of ready-to-use language the next time you have a conversation. This was precisely how I was able to learn to speak Mandarin Chinese in 1 year in such a short amount of time by collecting and copying native speakers. And this is precisely why I created the course, the Copy-Paste Speak course. As the name suggests, it's a proven system to help you copy native speakers in a very easy way by using a second brain so that you can improve your listening and speaking so that you can start having the conversations that matter to you. Okay, you might be asking, I get it. Building a second brain is important. Can you show me how to actually build a second brain so that I can improve learning a language? The first step is choosing your second brain. So I would select a platform that suits your style. For vocabulary, like I said, I use an app called Pleco to collect Chinese vocabulary. This is going to be specific to the language that you're learning. Many language learners like to use the program Anki for its ability to create flashcards to take advantage of the science of spaced repetition to help you build memory just before you forget it based on the idea of the forgetting curve. For collecting notes and resources, like I said, you can do this manually by using a pen and paper. You can also use digital tools. I like to use Notion because it's the right balance of simple and complex for me, and it also looks nice and minimalistic. Some of the other popular options for collecting notes are, for example, Evernote, Obsidian, Google Docs, or even Apple Notes. But you want to be very careful not to overcomplicate things when you're creating a second brain. According to Gall's law, a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be patched up to make it work. You have to start over with a working simple system. So in the beginning, I would highly recommend that the tool, don't focus too much on the tool. The tool doesn't matter that much. The most important thing is that you start creating, you start using, and you start applying what you're learning. You can always change the tool or patch it up later on, but you want to start simple first and upgrade as needed. Step number 2, capture everything that matters. Passive learning is good when you're short on time, but active learning is where real learning happens. So whenever I encounter new words, new phrases, new sentences, new idioms throughout the day, I'm storing them in my second brain. For example, with vocabulary, whenever I'm listening to a Mandarin podcast, whenever I'm watching a video, or even when I'm having a conversation, if I hear a new word that I don't understand or that I've never heard before, or maybe I've heard before but I just want a reminder, I pull up my dictionary app Pleco, I look it up, and I store it so that I can review it for later. The easier this step is to collect, the lower the friction, the more likely I'm going to collect vocabulary, the more vocabulary I'm going to learn, and the faster I'm going to speak fluently. On top of collecting vocabulary, I also like to collect resources. So for example, my favorite podcasts, videos, TV shows, books. I like to collect them so that I have an idea and that I can go back and review them later on and consolidate my memory, increasing my repetition, improving my memory. Okay, number 3 is organize for easy retrieval. To make your second brain useful, tag information by how you plan to use it. Here are some easy ways to tag your information. Number 1, you can tag it by vocabulary, creating sections for common words, phrases, and expressions organized by themes. You can tag idioms, capture common idioms and phrases that native speakers use all the time. You can tag specific resources, for example, like I mentioned, podcasts, videos, study tools organized by themes. You can also tag personal insights, so you can note down personal experiences, example sentences, cultural insights, and anything that will help you anchor it into your memory. Again, all of this adds context. Tagging your information helps you to organize your information, but always remember Gall's law, don't overcomplicate things. You always want to balance simplicity with friction and complexity. Always make it as simple as it needs to be. The simpler it is, the more likely you're able to do it, and the more likely you're able to be consistent. Step number 4, apply what you learn. Like I mentioned, this is arguably the most important step, so the whole point of having a system is not just to collect it and organize it and retrieve it, you also want to apply it. A second brain is only powerful when you actively use it. Here are some ways to do this. Number 1, a spaced repetition system. So spaced repetition is an evidence-based learning technique that is usually performed with flashcards. Newly introduced and more difficult flashcards are shown more frequently, while older and less difficult flashcards are shown less frequently to exploit the psychological spacing effect. This is a very powerful technique. It's a very popular technique. A lot of people use it to learn languages. And the most popular platform to do this is through a free platform called Anki, which allows you to create flashcards and review them at a later date using spaced repetition. Like I mentioned, this is a very powerful technique, but alone it's probably not enough to make you fluent because you're still missing that final step where you practice your speaking so that you can bridge the gap between learning that word and using it fluently in conversation with a native speaker, which is why I always practice writing and speaking to apply the vocabulary that I've learned and I've collected into my second brain. So every day, essentially, I'll just pick a vocabulary, I'll pick a topic, I'll pick a theme, or I'll pick an idiom. I'll pick one thing that I want to focus on, and I start writing about it. I write a draft, I use a template, I write a draft, and I try to use that word or that topic or that idiom in as many different contexts as possible. Because I know that the more contexts that I see the word in, that I see the vocabulary in, the more likely I am to use that in a sentence in real life when speaking. And once I've written down a draft, a basic draft, every day I use that draft to record myself speaking. Just like I'm doing right now, I record myself speaking in my target language in Mandarin Chinese. And while I'm recording myself, I'm trying my best not to look at the draft. I'm trying to visualize myself in a native conversation. I'm pretending like I'm having a conversation with another speaker, and I'm trying to speak as naturally as possible. This is the best way to mimic real life situations, bridging the gap between practice and real life. This helps me to bridge the gap between knowing isolated vocabulary and knowing how to use vocabulary and phrases fluently in sentences during real conversations. This is the missing step that prevents many learners from speaking fluently. So if you want to get better at speaking, I've created a speaking template that helps you to create your draft and makes the step super easy, low friction, so that you can start building a daily speaking habit, and I've made it available for free. You can download it below in the description below. If you want to get access to my full second brain system that helped me to learn to speak Mandarin Chinese fluently and also works for any other language, check out the Copy Paste Speak course below, which is on sale now. It's a proven system based on science so that you can improve your listening and speaking naturally so that you can start having the conversations that you want to have that matters to you in your target language. Hope this helps you guys. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye.